Another dynamic that you should become familiar with related to Hofstede's framework is this trade-off between a short-term focus and a long-term focus. And one way to think about this is how much are we willing to sacrifice today in the short term for some benefits tomorrow in the long term? This could be something as typical as, should I study a little bit more today so that I can do better on the exam next week? Or should I study less today and pay for that by not doing as well on the exam next week, right? Should I save more money today so that I can be in better financial condition in the future? Or should I be spending more money today and enjoying myself in the short term versus saving for the long term? All of these are aspects of short-term focus versus long-term focus. And Hofstede said that generally speaking, there are some national cultures that focus more on the short term versus the long term. And Hofstede reminds us that in the short term, if a national culture has a short-term focus, then people in that culture are more likely to be spending on consumption, buying laptops, buying the latest iPhone, buying things that we don't necessarily need, as opposed to longer term focus cultures that would spend less today, but save more for the future, either by investing or by saving. Also, in short-term focused national cultures, traditions from the past tend to be really, really important, as opposed to societies with longer term orientations tend to be more adaptable to change. They tend to sometimes even welcome change and figure out how to benefit from change. A third thing I would point out, in short-term orientations, there sometimes tends to be attribution of success and failure to luck, right? If somebody did very well, either on a sports team or on an exam or in their jobs, short-term orientations might say, look, that person just got lucky. Whereas a long-term orientation culture might say, that person succeeded because they tried, because they practiced, because they sacrificed in the short term to gain in the long term. Or on the flip side, that person failed because they didn't make the effort, because they didn't practice, because they were not good enough in this particular situation. So those are just three basic differences between cultures with long-term versus short-term orientations. And it's something that you do see from time to time. There are definitely certain national cultures that tend to promote saving, for example, and investing and studying now more than other national cultures. We don't have the data here with us, but if you were to look at the amount of savings across different national cultures, you'll see that certain countries tend to have higher rates of saving than others. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that saving a lot is always good, but it certainly does mean that there are tendencies in certain countries to promote saving more than in other countries. The US tends to be a country that has a relatively low savings rate. It's not zero, but it's relatively low simply because consumers in the US tend to like to buy a lot, right? Spend whatever money that they take in. In fact, some people need to spend all of the money that they take in because there's not a lot left over for savings or for anything else. So that's understandable. But there are other cultures that tend to promote saving, right? Living very well below your means if you can afford to do that, or taking whatever extra you might earn per month, if there is any extra, and saving that for tomorrow, saving that for 5 or 10 years from now. Again, it's not always easy to do, but there are some cultures that tend to promote these things more than others. And that's one of the dimensions that Hofstede uses when he compares national cultures across different nations.